thankful for those miracle of salvation stories, many lessons and takeaways, and would love to hear your takeaway from these stories. But personally, just realize the impact of the simple gospel. It just needs to get proclaimed. It just needs to be proclaimed through us, through people. And sometimes we are shy about putting ourselves out there, but when we do, these amazing stories can happen. So hope that encouraged you, even as you imagine, like, wow, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could be that source of blessing, but these people are ordinary people. They just decided, I'm going to love this person. And so that person received love and they became a Christian. So what an amazing transformation. And then also, I think just when a person's ready to hear, then the gospel just clicks, just that truth. There are a lot of barriers that people have. And once that gets overcome, just the message itself, because it's just a powerful truth, it just lands on a person, and then that decision just goes so fast. So really am thankful for all the people in that video, all the people that God used to transform people's lives, and there's 555 this past year, so praise the Lord. All right, so I wanted to talk today just on a different topic, the theme of identity. And the reason why I thought about this is we were having dinner in New York, and we were at a dim sum restaurant, which was great, by the way. And all of the tri-state students and staff and relatives, families, we all gathered in this place in Queens in Flushing. And we had a prompt, actually, during our in-between eating all the, shumai and things like that. And that prompt was, if you had to look back on this year and there was a song that you would write to God, like what would you write? And of course, you need to be really talented to write that. So we said, you don't have to write the actual lyrics of the entire song, but based on Psalm 95, which I talked about this past Sunday, what would be a song of thanks that you would write? Just the title of that song. So I wonder what you guys would write. Here's my title. My heart is a pomegranate. Okay, I know that seems random, but our senior pastor, Pastor Ed, came up with this analogy years ago where he compared our heart to a pomegranate. And inside, he said, if you open up, there's all these seeds, right? And I know it's kind of gross if you think about it, but every seed represents a person. And so that person is embedded in a person's heart. So yeah, I mean, just got to get over this whole picture of like a pomegranate, but some of you have different, like, wow, I wish I could eat that, or some have different responses to this picture. But I thought that captures what I would write to God, because my heart is full of people this past year. And compared to what would have been my heart if I had not become Christian, I think it would probably be just a couple seeds there. But this past year, really this past couple years, God has blessed me with all of you. I think about all our travels to the tri-state area, all those people that I had previously not known very well. Just sometimes I literally have never seen their face, even though they go to our church. That's how large our network of churches is. And yet they've become very precious to me. So that's my song. My heart is a pomegranate. What would your song be? That's something to think about. Maybe you could share about that over lunch. So I thought one of the byproducts of having a lot of people in your heart is that it does something to you. It forms and shapes your identity. And so I wanted to talk about the theme of identity from Psalm 1. So just follow along with me. It's just 6 verses. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish." So in verse 1, it says, Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. So the psalmist talks about the blessed person or the blessed life. And we don't use the word blessed so often in the everyday common speech, but the word blessed means, as you would imagine, joyful and fulfilled and satisfied. So what makes someone's life blessed? What is the modern day notion of a blessed life? Now, why don't you guys talk about that? Minute and a half. What is your notion of the blessed life? What are people's notion of the blessed life? So let's do that. Right. Okay. So that got your thinking going. What is the blessed life? There's a lot of answers to that. I just want to focus on what the psalmist thinks is the blessed life. Initially, the description of the blessed life, according to the psalmist, is in the negative. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinner, nor sits in the seat of scoffers." So the blessed are not the wicked, are not these people, not the way of the sinners, not the seat of the scoffers. So I'm not going to go into each one, but I want to focus on the word wicked here. It's who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. And in verse 4, we read that a little bit what the wicked are. The wicked are not so, it says, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. So the wicked are described as chaff. That's the metaphor. And so what is chaff? It's in wheat. It's that empty husk that's once the grain is out of that husk, it's just like the empty shell. And then it gets blown away by the wind because there's no weight. Now, on the other hand, because it's empty, it's hollow, it just flies away when the grain, that something solid inside, is removed. And so it's driven away by external forces. So the chaff, according to the psalmist, it's described as like that's the wicked. And I wonder why. And I think it's because, well, first of all, I just want to say it's an apt description of modern life. Ironically, the chaff is what people say is the blessed life. And it's this notion of a chaff blowing free, doing loops in the wind, and untethered, unencumbered, unobligated. You are free, so free, and you just go with the wind, man, And to that extent that you're able to express yourself in that freedom, our culture calls you blessed. But if you think about it, that freedom or that unanchored life, a life that's unencumbered, not governed by others, who has a claim on your life, as appealing as that might sound to a lot of us, such a life eventually, if you play the movie, you play that out, leads to a lack of definition of who you are, because I talked about identity, and focus, because you're just going with the flow, and ultimately it lands you into a very isolated and lonely life. Now, I just want to use this example, and first of all, like I haven't done this a lot, but I want to just use this movie and the song and the lyrics of this song to describe, like, yes, this is the cultural ethos that of a chaff-like life. It's the movie Frozen. I love the song. I love the songs, and I actually love the movie. It's sweet. It warms your heart. It warms my heart when I watch it. But I just want to examine just a couple of stanzas of that famous song, "Let It Go." Okay, and so here's how it goes. It says, "Let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on, the cold never bothered me." Anyway, okay, on the one hand, I like the way it rhymes, and it's nice. But if you think about it, this is the cultural ethos of the chaff. Like, you're just a tough, individualistic person. I'm not going to be affected by my surroundings, and it just feels so empowering, and I can make it in life. I don't need you. And then another stanza, "It's funny how some distance makes everything seem small, and the fears that once controlled me can't get to me at all. It's time to see what I can do to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I am free. Let it go, let it go. I'm the one with the wind." Notice the wind there. "And sky, let it go. You'll never see me cry. Here I stand and here I stay. Let the storm rage on." So if you actually think about this imagery, it's somebody who's just standing by themselves in the face of a wind, and I'm going to just be myself. And in order to be myself, I'm going to look into my heart and see what there is inside. And what is inside is my own desires and my own dreams. And you just follow those desires and dreams no matter what people say to you. In fact, it is empowering, because like, I don't care what you say to me. I'm going to follow what I desire. And if you actually know the movie, that leads actually her into utter isolation, away from community, away from people, and she's alone. So to be chaff-like in your identity means that your self-worth is not based on sublimating your interests and your desires for the good of the community or for your family and obligations to others. In fact, it's just asserting your own desires and your own interests, and that's the mantra of our age. Just be yourself and find yourself and follow your heart. And it's that self-actualized version of our identity that's that gets proposed out there and how you become yourself. Now, this has been a long time happening in our culture. This is not new. Back in the, man, I just feel bad like referring to my own period of growing up. But back in the 1970s, there was a book called Passages, and you can even tell by the font, right? Like, it's old book. And the author says that when you move away from institutional claims and other people's agendas and external valuations and accreditations into yourself, like, in other words, I accredit myself. I'm not going to be accredited by you. In other words, even back then in the 70s, like, I determine who I am and nobody else. So it's this modern version or modern understanding of identity based on what gets expressed in the individual. And that's where we get the term expressive individualism. It's, I'm going to express what's inside of me, and that's who I am, and that's how you get identity. And that's how you get self-worth. But here's the problem. This has not led to greater blessing, the blessed life. It has not led to more joy or stability. In fact, one would argue a pursuit of this expressive individualism, finding your identity within yourself, has left a world bereft of any identity at all. In fact, it's caused much social anxiety, where you worry about what people say of you, because there is no fundamental core in your identity, the self, which forms who you are, so that you are now vulnerable to the opinions of others, and in fact vulnerable to like the thumbs up and thumbs down on social media, some comment that someone says out there, and you end up getting swayed because people lack the stable core of who you are. This self-actualized version of your identity has led to this. And so this question of who am I, it's an important question to ask. But how does your identity get formed? And the world seems to suggest it gets formed by just going with the flow, man. Just follow your desires. And that's a scary world to me, because those forces out there, the winds that shape a person, there's some dark forces out there. There's some dark forces that will shape you morally and give you advice without an overarching purpose to your life. And so I worry, like, not just for ourselves, but just imagine the vulnerable elementary school child or youth. I worry about those kids growing up in this environment with no stable core. They just watch and they hear and they just consume, and they get affected by those values. And these values are not shared values, but it's just based on what one person feels and another person feels. And so no wonder people try to navigate through this world through just wearing masks, because that's the only way that you can actually find some semblance of acceptance. Because if you just reveal who you really are, you might get rejected. It's a unnerving, unsettling situation to go into. So think about mask wearing. When I, like, not literally mask, but just you take on different identities, different personas. And that's an insecure world, because you as a person are entering into these different scenarios not knowing whether or not you, and that means who you are, will be accepted. So, a lot of you guys came to campus, came to Boston. You're the new person in town. And so, I don't know, maybe like you just try to fit in by, hey, I think I can convincingly pull off being a weightlifter or something. I don't know, like, you know how that goes. And so you take protein shakes and like, I'm gonna hang with my weightlifting friends, or I'll be that study nerd and hang with my fellow lab mates by coming up with additional lab experiments in addition to the ones that you're assigned, because that's the kind of person you're gonna be, and that's how you're going to be accepted. Well, we know how that goes. You go from one social circle to the other, and there's a lot of pressure to conform. And after a while, you end up like asking yourself, like, who am I again? Like, who is the me? Because I've managed to just be all these things for people, and I don't know who I am. And so here's the problem. Not only is that effort to fit in tiring, it just doesn't work, because the self, I keep talking about the self, that stable core, it has to happen gradually. There are no shortcuts. A self needs to be filled with content and weighed down by a series of actions that produce a certain character. And I would argue that is almost impossible other than in the context of a covenantal community. A group of people that you are obligated to. They then form you and shape you because you respond to your obligation and responsibility toward another, either to love or care for, etc. So the psalmist says this approach to life of moving from one group to the other like a chaff, uncommitted, untethered, just transient. That's the way of the wicked. And wicked, it doesn't immediately translate, right? Like, that's wicked. But wicked is generally described in the Bible in terms of relational isolation, which is one of the primary consequences of sin. It's when you get disconnected from God and others. Remember Cain in Genesis 4. It says, verse 12, when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. This is the curse of Cain because he killed his brother Abel. You shall be a fugitive, and it says a wanderer on the earth. And elsewhere it says a restless wanderer on the earth, moving from one place to another, floating from here and there. And then it says Cain went away from the presence of the Lord. So the wicked goes where the winds take them, and it's usually away from God and away from his people who have the ability, ironically, to properly form a person, and then you have a chance to cultivate a substantive identity. So the Bible is clear that the life that is blessed, in other words, is the one that is rooted. And so we see in Psalm 1 verse 3, he is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. He prospers. The psalmist says the blessed life is like a tree planted, rooted by streams of water. That's profound. The tree that is subject to seasons. Think about that. The cold, frigid winter, depending on where this tree is. If it's in the northeast, we still haven't experienced that this winter or moving on. Although I'm told in January there's going to be a lot of snow. Or it could be like a very dry summer. But a tree is able to withstand all of that. Even though it may not always be fruitful or productive, may not always be blossoming, and yet the tree being planted where its roots have access to a constant, unremitting stream of water is capable of weathering whatever the conditions that may come their way. That's the blessed life. The difference between the blessed and the wicked there then is described as one who is anchored, impervious to external forces, and the other being the chaff, like a shell just gets blown away and inevitably gets crushed by unpredictable and unforeseen events. So then what does it mean to be rooted? What does it mean to be rooted as it relates to our identity? And I've been alluding to this as a stable core. So again, one definition is an identity is a stable self-understanding. This is who I am. It doesn't shift based upon who I am with. I am stable. It doesn't change from day to day, week to week. So how does one form this stable identity? And I think in traditional cultures and ancient cultures, really, let's face it, in non-Western cultures, your identity comes from what? Your role in your family and in your clan and in your community that's assigned to you. And so your self-worth and esteem depends on how, like, it's in that context. Like, I am a father and I am a husband, or I am a son, I am a cousin, and it's in that group that your role gets fixed and your identity gets forged. Even in America, like, there was a term called I'm the breadwinner, or I'm the homemaker. Like, they don't use those terms anymore. It's, at least though, it's a role that formed like who you are in this world. And so, to that extent that you embrace that, you would not be swayed by other forces that question like who you are. Now, to continue the theme of fruit, like pomegranate, I'm going to talk about an onion. Because Tony Campolo, one of my favorite preachers back in the day, likened a person's life to an onion. Now, I don't know if this will make you cry, or if you're hungry, chop that up and put it in the curry. But this is an onion. And he likened it to a person in that, it was really interesting. I'll never forget this. He said that the peels of an onion represent the different roles that you play. So like a husband, wife, mother, father, son, grandchild. Like for me, it would be the additional role of a minister, and then older brother, So all of these form who you really are. Like the person is formed by the different roles that you play in the context of community. And then he said, if you peel away all of those roles, so I'm not a husband anymore, I'm not a wife, I'm not a friend. And then he says, what do you have left? And he says, you have nothing. You're the chaff. You're empty. You're nothing. I thought that analogy has always stuck to me. A Christian, then, is someone who has been planted and rooted into something besides him or herself. In other words, we are the product of our relationship with others. We invest in others, others who have invested in us, and it starts with God. In the beginning, God, and we have a long tradition in Scripture of what it means to be a people of God, to starting with Abraham and saying we inherit that all the way to Jesus. And there's, in other words, something that's been deposited into our life, planted from the outside into us. And that's God's view of who we are, not as a nondescript, empty chaff, empty self, undefined blob, but God saying, you are this. I am calling you my own. You are my people. You are a holy people. You are my children. You are co-heirs. You are apostles. You are ambassadors. He calls us what we are not. He defines us. And we are rooted in that salvation history. And I would argue that identity is the stable core that gives us a true life of blessing. Because out of it, we can actually bless others, just like you saw in the miracle of the salvation video. A person that lives for God is a tree, anchored, planted in God's identity. That's the stable core, and that gives your life power. Verse 2 alludes to that. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. It's why the psalmist says, go back to God's law. Law is boundaries, rules. And to the extent that you embrace it, you're going to form who you are based on your fellowship with God. Because that relationship with God is unchanging. It will never change because you have not performed well enough or whatever. People may mock you. But no, my relationship with God will always be the consistent backdrop through which I could navigate life. So the gospel is really the only system in the world of thought that gives you, and I don't think I'm really overstating this. The gospel is really the only system in the world that gives you a radically and totally different identity than what the secular world will give you, or really what any other religion in the world gives you, because Christianity says your identity is received and it's not achieved. It's received from God and from the people around you. So the question of who am I? If you ask that question, who am I? Sometimes you have that question when you get all existentialist like views in finals. You know, I used to I don't want to study right now. Like, who am I? And but have that thought, have that moment. It's a very important question because it relates to how one forms on the inside. Either we become a tree with rootedness and get out of this chaff-like life, or we remain susceptible to the forces of others because you have decided that what's more important is being free to be you, which leads to an unformed you. And then, of course, we have all the dysfunction that comes along with that. The Bible says that's wickedness, and the chaff is that one that the wind drives away. And you can imagine, like, as you grow 10 years older, 20 years older, if you don't have that sense of stable core, you might be asked to compromise morally, the business practices when you're asked to cheat, adultery in the future, all like the kind of father and mother that you're going to be, and you're going to be swayed without this stable identity in God. So verse 5, it says, therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And we could totally see that. Instead, it says, you should be embedded in the congregation of the righteous. And I looked up that Hebrew word for congregation is community. It's a community of faith. Sounds very much like church to me. It makes sense. Then who we are gets formed in the congregation of the righteous, in the church. Because as we are obligated to one another, then we become more like the peels of an onion. Become a big fat onion. Okay, not a big fat onion, a nice looking onion. Because who am I, like Manny, apart from the role that I have as a minister, or as a father to my kids, or as a husband to my wife, Sunny, or I'm related to the Boston team. I'm related to the students here in Boston, and in the Northeast, and in the tri-state. I am a disciple of Jesus. My mentors are Pastor Ed and Kelly, who have led me ever since my sophomore year in college. I relate to them, therefore, in that way. And Manny, I would argue, does not exist apart from those relationships, because who am I if I'm on an island by myself? After a while, I would be asking, who am I? I'll be talking to like a soccer ball or a volleyball, like by myself. I'll be an onion with all the peels away. I'm nothing. So the Bible is so insistent then on saying you must embed yourself in a community of believers. And one implication of that is that there is no such thing as a Lone Ranger Christian. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but this idea that you're a Lone Ranger Christian, that's like an oxymoron. It's like saying you're a grown-up baby. Because Christians, by definition, are part of the body of Christ, the congregation of the righteous, a community of believers. The moment you enter into a relationship with God, and it's not the view of Christianity out there where you just consume content and you're just out and you just attend services on Sundays. No, you could see that it's a mutual obligation toward one another in a thick web of relationships that will then form you. Because if it's not, then you might as well be isolated. There's no such thing as a Lone Ranger Christian. Remember, God is relational. He is loving. He's interested in that relational dynamic between us and God and with one another, because He's our Heavenly Father and we are brothers and sisters in Christ. So anyone who believes and embraces that as a vital and indispensable part of like what it means to be Christian, like that person's life will be truly blessed. So I just want to end with 1 Peter, I'll skip that verse, but 1 Peter 2, 9 through 12. It says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Notice these titles given to His people. A people for His own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who called you out of darkness, and I might add, like isolation, into His marvelous light. Once you were not a people, you were alone, you were a chaff, you were by yourself, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Once you were a disconnected, lonely individual trying to fit into different backdrops, but now you are a holy people, a royal priesthood. This is a clue, my friends, on how you form your identity and escape from this hollowness of pursuing your own desires. It's to be committed to God and to His people. And when you do that, it makes sense. You mature as a human being when you realize that you're part of a family. Think about that. When you've embraced your role in your own family, even, right? Before you're like, yeah, when you're a teenager, maybe like, I don't like my family. But then when you embraced it, your life became richer. All your relatives, your cousins, your extended like aunts and uncles, to the extent that you go like, I have a role in this family, then that matured you because you suddenly had obligations, right? So to the extent that you've embraced your spiritual family, you become a more mature human being because you become more yourself when you are aware of the larger thing of which you are a part. And the Bible says you are not just a part of any family. You are part of a privileged, honored, royal priesthood and holy nation. That's what we are called to. We are obligated, and to the extent that every one of you guys, every one of us, see ourselves that way, our life will be truly blessed. And so my question to you is, have you ever thought of yourself as part of this grand network, this group of people that's a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a tribe? Is this a big part of your identity? Or is your Christian identity just sort of a side, localized, individualistic thing along with the other individual interests that you have? So I got some emails from some of my former students during Thanksgiving. I really appreciated reading all of those. And it was a blessing to read those. And particularly, I noted those emails where they are expressing somewhere this sentiment. Thank you for loving me when I was a student. Now that I am one of the older ones, and by the way, that is an identity role, an older one. Now that I'm part of one of the older ones, I understand now what it takes to build up the church and what it takes to shape a fragile culture and what it takes to embrace that role, even though I don't want to at times, but I know now, like, it takes self-denial, but also affirming that this is my role in my local context. And I was just blessed reading those. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad that you realize that, because there's a sense of camaraderie that gets built when other people embrace that and I'm embracing that, and mutually we're all in this together, even though we are across on different coasts and on different cities. So I just want to say to you, earlier I said one of the diagnoses of the human condition by the Bible is that we have been isolated, separated from God, and cut off from God, and that was a definition of wicked. And that we can only conceive of our own lives in this individualistic, isolated framework. But let's just come to this conclusion. The person that is driven by those things, they will end up being driven by those things. By appetites, by emotions, the person never forms. So in contrast, to become rooted in his community, totally committed, it is truly the blessed life. And so who am I to define ourselves by our relationship with God and with others, to walk who we walk this faith journey with? Like, I think that is something that if you embrace, the Bible says your life will be truly blessed. So I suggest that the question of who am I, like, you're not going to be able to answer that question apart from covenantal communities. So I want to end by just having you guys just share, like, how would you answer this question? How would you answer this question based on today's message? I'll give you guys a couple minutes, and then we'll have a final song. Let's do that.
I'd like to invite everyone to stand as we just respond singing this closing song together. I'm not sure what you guys said in your discussion groups, but I think one way we can respond to today's message is to hear who does God say we are? And let's all sing this as a response to that. Who am I? I am who you, God, who you say I am. So let's all sing this together. Who am I that the highest King would welcome? I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace rushed deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. I am for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed.
have stability in who we are because of your love for us, because we are forgiven, we are redeemed, and we are shown to be precious in your eyes. And Lord, may that give us confidence as we navigate through this world, and help us to embrace the roles that you've given to us as your chosen people, a ambassador, a minister, that you've entrusted us with people that we are obligated to. Lord, help us to see that that's the way to blessing. And Lord, help us out of then that stable core to be able to bless others and bring people to the life that you've called them to, all the way to eternity. Thank you so much for your grace and your kindness and how you have led each of us so that we can be formed and shaped in you. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, please be seated.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Manny. Just wanted to help you guys think about like, what does this mean? And I think probably if you had some imagery to hold on to, I mean, there's a lot of imagery in that message, but probably the onion kind of hits at the core message the most. And I wrote down, what does this mean? Like, it kind of gives me a different way to think about Christian life and Christianity. Rather than see my relationships as like chains that bind me or restrict me, I need to learn to see them as layers that form me and enrich in me. And that is true blessing. And so like when I want to let it go, that's as foolish as an onion casting off all its layers, thinking that at its core is something else. So maybe just, let that sink in. And I don't want to cast all those things off. So I think the first layer is, putting on Christ. That's rich imagery in the epistles. We got to put on that layer of Christ. Who I am, who you say I am. And then Christian life then is about onion building, becoming a beefier and beefier onion as you add more layers and more people into your life. So then we got to talk about how can we add more layers, and maybe that's something you could talk about during lunch. I think we are having some onions in our lunch. We're having curry, I believe, and so we'll have that. See you guys next week.